Good afternoon, sir. I am Shanna Marie Alibuna, and I am going to report the topic entitled Metaphor and Stylistics. In the introduction, figurative language is essential in literature, particularly in works like Shakespeare's Sonnet 73. I have here an example of Shakespeare's work entitled Sonnet 73. That time of year thou mightst in me behold, when yellow leaves, or none or few, do hang upon those boughs which shake against the cold, bare ruined choirs, where late the sweet bird sang. And me thou seest the twilight of such day, as after sunset fadeth in the west, which by and by black night doth take away death's second self, that seals up all in rest. In me thou seest the glowing of such fire, that on the ashes of his youth doth lie, as the deathbed whereon it must expire, consumed with that which it was nourished by. This thou perceived, which makes thy love more strong, to love that well which thou must live ere long. As we read the Sonnet 73 of Shakespeare, it talks about the parts of the day, light, darkness, fire, and ashes. We can understand that the poem is about life, aging, and death, and that Shakespeare meant to draw a parallel between the passing of a day, the fading of the light, the extinguishing of fire on the one hand, and the passing of one's lifetime on the other. Metaphors have been a focus of study among philosophers, linguists, and stylisticians. The study of figurative language has offered several theories and conventional and novel. Research on metaphor has evolved since the 1980s, highlighting their importance in human thought and reasoning. Initially seen as major rhetorical devices, metaphor and metonymy gained a broader relevance beyond literature due to the cognitive turn. Let's proceed to the next one, which is the conventional and novel views of metaphor. According to Lakoff and Johnson 1980, Vexes 2002-2010, the first common views of metaphor are: first, metaphor is viewed as a linguistic phenomenon, primarily a property of words. Second, it relies on a resemblance or similarity between the entities being compared. Third is typically used for artistic or rhetorical purposes, particularly in literature. Fourth, requires conscious and deliberate usage, often associated with special talent. Fifth is can be seen as a non-essential in everyday communication and is not universally applied. Six is sometimes categorized as a deviant or improper when deviating from literal expressions. And lastly is the concept of dead metaphors suggests some metaphors become conventional and lose their metaphorical significance over time. According to Gibbs 2006, the above ways of thinking about metaphor also mean that metaphorical meaning is thought of as being created de novo, and it does not reflect pre-existing aspects of how people ordinarily conceptualized ideas and events in terms of pervasive metaphorical schemes. This is exactly what recent cognitive linguistic, philosophical, and psychological studies now focus on, arguing for the potential that language, thought, and experience are fundamentally metaphorical. For the next is metaphor in a historical perspective. The term metaphor has been crucial in rhetorical studies since Aristotle. According to this, since Aristotle started, the term metaphor has been crucial in terms of rhetorical studies. Eco also argues that understanding metaphor involves complex rhetorical activity. He also presents two perspectives on language. The first one is language is inherently metaphorical, and second, language functions as a rule-based system with metaphor representing a deviation that can lead to renewal. So classical rhetoric generally favors the second option and considers the concepts of metaphor and metonymy as a matter of language alone, as opposed to the cognitive tradition which favors the first option. So the next one is metaphor as transference. So according to Aristotle, metaphor in poetics as the application of an alien name by transference. So the types of transference includes from genus to species, example, lying to anchor as a type of lying. So next is from species to genus, example, 10,000 representing a large number of deeds. Next is from species to species, example, using to draw away in place of to cleave. Next is by analogy or proportion. So the example of it is comparing evening to old age. So in rhetoric, according in Book 3, Part 4, Aristotle adds that similes are also metaphors. The difference between the two is only in the form of expression. So similes are explicit comparisons using the words like and as, resulting in longer and thus less attractive and less interesting phrases. Whereas metaphors are implicit comparisons. They are rather straightforward identifications without explanation. So, and they can also imply riddles. Like for example, leaped on the foe as a lion is a simile, whereas the lion leaped is a metaphor. So, both referring to the courageous Achilles. So also, in Aristotle's view, using metaphor, which is the mark of genius, provides freshness and liveliness to speech as it helps new ideas to be promptly grasped in novel ways, so which attracts listeners. So in rhetoric, Aristotle claims that metaphor, which is a matter of words only and signals deviance in language, is a valuable device in poetry as well as prose. So according to Aristotle, metaphor is very important when it comes to poetry and prose. So appropriate and beautiful metaphors help to give style, clearness, charm, and distinction, and also persuade and please as well as decorate discourse. So according also to Aristotle, he tells that metaphors can also give style, clearness, charm, and distinction. So the next one is metaphor as the abuse of words. So according to John Locke, 1689 to 1836, calls the use of metaphors the abuse of words and figurative speech as the abuse of language. So according to John Locke, the use of metaphors, the abuse of words, and figurative speech as the abuse of language. So Locke claims that figurative speech is admitted largely because wit and fancy find easier entertainment in the world than dry truth and real knowledge. But if the goal of the speaker is not pleasure and delight, but to speak of the things as they are, we should be aware that the function of figurative speech is to insinuate wrong ideas. So, move the passions and thereby mislead the judgment. So in this way, metaphors are seen by him as perfect cheats only, belonging to the arts of fallacy and promoting error and deceit. So to be avoided at all costs if the speaker wants to inform or instruct in the discourse, and to be considered as a fault of the language or the speaker using them. So the next one is metaphor as a fable in brief. So in the New Science, Gayam Batista Vico 1725 to 1948 says that the most luminous, necessary and frequent trope is metaphor, which can insensate and animate things. So Vico claims that every metaphor is a fable in brief. Vico notes that the human body and its parts, as well as the human senses and passions, often from phrases about inanimate things. So his illustrative examples include, among many others, head for top or beginning and the mouth for any opening. He also concludes that this is because man in his ignorance makes himself the rule of the universe, for in the examples cited he has made of himself as entire world. So, Vico also claims that all the tropes, including metaphor, metonymy, synecdoche, and irony, are necessary modes of expression of all the first poetic nations, despite the fact that they have been seen as ingenious inventions of writers. So according daw to Vico, the metaphor, metonymy, synecdoche, and irony is it is the example of mode of expressions in poetry. So next is metaphor as the relation between tenor and vehicle. So I.A. Richards, a key figure in New Criticism, emphasized the importance of metaphor in language studies. He also outlined his metaphor theory in the Philosophy of Rhetoric on 1936. A metaphor consists of two components: tenor, the main idea, and the vehicle, the imagery that expresses the tenor, which is the main idea. So the relationship between tenor and vehicle is termed the ground. Tension refers to the literal incompatibility between the tenor and vehicle. So Richards uses the word metaphor in a broad sense, including cases where a word being grounded in some direct resemblance compounds two ideas into one, and we speak of one as if it were something else. He also uses it to refer to metaphoric processes in which we perceive or think of or feel about one thing in terms of another, as when looking at a building it seems to have a face and to confront us with the peculiar expressions. So indeed, he argues that everyday discourse is mostly metaphoric as opposed to pure scientific language. He also notes that words may be both literal and metaphorical at the same time, and they may even be used in several metaphors with different foci. Richard gives a detailed discussion not only of the 18th century comparison view of metaphor, but also mentions the technique used by then contemporaries, such as André Breton in his poems, who favored putting together two things that are very remote from one another. Richard goes on to say that language is no more signaling system. It is the instrument of all our distinctively human development, of everything in which we go beyond the other animals, beyond the other animals. So thus, Richards has pioneering ideas about combining the workings of the mind and the workings of the language, and says that by learning more about one, we can learn more about others as well. Next is metaphor as focus and frame. So Max Black's interaction theory of metaphor developed in key works from 1955, 1962, and 1979 to 1993, builds on I.A. Richards' ideas. So, Black contrasts his theory with substitution and comparison views of metaphor. Substitution views treat metaphor as a decorative device while comparison views establish an analogy. So the key aspects of Black's theory includes: first, metaphorical statements consist of a primary subject, which is the focus, and a secondary subject, which is the frame that can be defined within context. Second is the secondary subject is viewed as a system rather than an individual. Third is metaphors project implications from the secondary subject onto the primary subject. Fourth is metaphor creators structure features of the primary subject, aligning them with the secondary subject's implications. And lastly is the interaction between subjects includes selecting properties, constructing parallel implications, and reciprocal changes in understanding. So in Black's views, metaphorical utterances can be more or less emphatic, depending on whether the metaphor can be substituted or paraphrased without losing its insight. Or it can also be more or less resonant or having more or less possible interpretations. Strong metaphors are both emphatic and resonant. Black also sees metaphors as having an important cognitive function, but he also touches upon the creativity or productivity of metaphors and says that metaphors as cognitive instruments can constitute new aspects of reality. So, his strong creativity thesis focuses on the possibility that metaphors create previously unrecognized connections between domains. So, that's the end of my report po. Thank you.
Metaphor based on similarity. Roman Jacobson, a renowned linguist and literary theorist, made a significant contributions to our understanding of language and communication. In his seminal 1956 essay, Two Aspects of Language and Two Types of Aphasic Disturbances, Jacobson delved into the complexities of aphasia, a condition that disrupts an individual's ability to communicate effectively. Aphasic is a neurological disorder that impairs a person's ability to communicate, affecting their comprehensions, production, and use of language. It can manifest in the various ways, impacting the ability to speak, write, and read or understand spoken language. The severity of aphasia can range from mild to severe, and it can affect different aspects of language processing such as word retrieval. So in word retrieval, we have difficulty finding the right words to express thoughts. Number 2, we have grammar and syntax. So we have problems forming grammatically correct sentences. And also we have comprehension, which is difficulty understanding spoken or written language. And last, we have reading and writing. It challenges with reading and writing skills. So, aphasic can be caused by brain injuries such as stroke, head trauma, or brain tumors. Jacobson observed that aphasic disturbances often disrupt the intricate process involved in language production and comprehension. He highlighted how these disturbances can affect three key aspects of language. Number 1, we have word selection. In word selection, aphasic individuals may struggle to choose the appropriate word to express their intended meaning. They might substitute words, use incorrect words, or be unable to find the right word at all. Number 2, we have word substitution. Aphasic individuals may replace one word with another, often substituting a similar sounding word or a word related in meaning. This can lead to errors in communication and make it difficult for others to understand their intended message. And number 3, we have contextual use. Aphasic individual may have difficulty understanding how words are used in different contexts. They might misinterpret the meaning of words based on their literal definitions, failing to grasp the intended meaning based on the surrounding context. These disruptions to word selection, substitution, and contextual use underscore how aphasia can significantly hinder the ability to communicate effectively. Jacobson's exploration of aphasia revealed that the vital roles of metaphor and metonymy in communication beyond linguistic impairments. His insights have influenced linguistics, cognitive science, and literary studies, deepening our understanding of language structure, cognitive mechanism, and artistic expression. Jacobson's interdisciplinary approach and profound observations have left a lasting impact, shaping ongoing research and scholarship in these fields, and emphasizing the enduring relevance of his contributions to our understanding of language and communication. Next, we have metaphor as foreground deviation in literature. Style in the realm of language refers to the unique way an individual employs language in a specific context to achieve a particular purpose. It encompasses the choices a writer or speaker makes regarding vocabulary, sentence structure, tone, and overall presentation. This intricate interplay of linguistic elements shapes the reader or listener's experience and ultimately influences the message impact. Style can be broadly categorized into two distinct categories, which is transparent and opaque. Transparent style prioritizes clarity and directness, aiming to convey information as efficiently and effortlessly as possible. It often employs a simple language, straightforward sentence structures, and minimal embellishment. The focus lies on the message itself, allowing the reader or listener to easily grasp the intended meaning without being distracted by complex or ornate language. This style is commonly found in technical writing, scientific reports, and news articles, where accuracy and objectivity are paramount. While opaque style, on the other hand, embraces complexity and ambiguity, often employing figurative language, unconventional sentence structures, and intricate wordplay. The emphasis shifts from conveying information to creating a particular effect, evoking emotions, or prompting deeper reflection. This style is also prevalent in literary works, poetry, and persuasive writing, where the writer aims to engage the reader's imagination, challenge their assumptions, or evoke a specific emotional response. The distinction between the transparent and opaque style is not always clear-cut, and many works fall somewhere on a spectrum between the two extremes. A writer might choose to employ a transparent style for the majority of their work while strategically incorporating elements of opacity to enhance specific sections or emphasize particular points. While literary metaphors may not be fundamentally different from other metaphors in terms of their structure or function, they often exhibit a higher degree of novelty and are designed to be reread and reinterpreted. Literary metaphors are not merely tools for conveying meaning. They are often crafted to provoke thought, spark imagination, and invite multiple readings. This emphasis on rereading and reinterpretation stems from the unique textual context that literature creates. Unlike other forms of language that often refer to external context, like a new article referencing current events, literature often constructs its own internal world, governed by its own rules, characters, and themes. This self-contained world allows for multiple interpretations and rereadings as readers bring their own experiences and perspective to bear on the text. Consider a literary metaphor like the road less traveled. This metaphor, while seemingly simple, can be interpreted in various ways, depending on the context on the literary work. In one story, it might represent a path of individuality and self-discovery, while in another, it might symbolize a path of hardship and sacrifice. The essence of style lies in the unique way individuals use language to convey messages in specific contexts, influencing the reader's experience and the impact of the messages. Metaphors, whether novel or dead, serve as deviations from the norm and can draw attention to specific elements in the text, especially in poetry. These linguistic deviations contribute to the unique expressive qualities of literary language, which can be reread and reinterpreted due to its self-contained textual context. When analyzing while analyzing style and literary effects, it's crucial to consider both the language itself and the context in which it is used, as the interaction influences the depth and the richness of meaning in literary works. And number 3, we have metaphor in conversation. When we communicate, the words we use often carry a double meaning, the literal meaning of the sentence and the speaker's intended meaning. While these meanings might align in straightforward statements, metaphor often introduce a deliberate divergence, creating a gap between the literal and the intended. This gap is precisely what gives metaphors their power and expressiveness. Consider the sentence, Sam is a pig. Literally, this statement suggests that Sam is an animal, a member of the swine family. However, in most contexts, it allows the speaker to express their judgment subtly and evocatively. This distinction between literal sentence meaning and speaker's intended meaning is crucial for understanding metaphors. They often function as a kind of linguistic shorthand, allowing us to convey complex ideas and emotions through a single evocative image. And this brings us to another important aspect of metaphors. They often represent a deviation from the norm. From the norm, pig again. We might try to paraphrase it as Sam is messy and unkempt, or Sam has bad hygiene. While this paraphrase captures some aspect of the metaphorical meaning, they lack the evocative power and the subtle nuances of the original metaphor. The image of a fig with its connotations of filth, gluttony, and sloppiness creates a much richer and more complex understanding than a simple list of negative qualities. This inherent non-paraphrasability of metaphors has led linguistics to consider them as deviations from the norm. Metaphors present a unique challenge in language as they often convey beyond their literal interpretations. This distinction between the literal surface and the intended or deeper meanings in metaphors is essential to understanding their communicative power. Metaphors deviate from the norm of direct language by offering a figurative comparison that invites nuanced interpretations, making them a valuable tool for expressive communication. We have here metaphor and usure. Jacques Derrida's 1972 essay, White Mythology, Metaphor in the Text of Philosophy, is a landmark work that deconstructs the traditional understanding of metaphor, particularly in the context of philosophical discourse. Derrida's approach is inherently critical and seeks to dismantle the assumption underlying established theories of metaphor, including those of Aristotle. He does this by focusing on the concept of usure, which translates roughly to wear and tear, to describe the grateful erosion of meaning in metaphorical language as it is used and reused within philosophical discourse. To illustrate his concept of usure, Derrida employs a striking analogy of words as coin with inscriptions. Just as coins bear inscriptions on both sides, words, according to Derrida, can carry both literal and metaphorical meanings. With time and repeated use, the metaphorical inscription on these coin words can fade, becoming less distinct and more readily accepted as a part of the word's standard meaning. This fading, this usure, reverse a side of coin which gradually diminishes with use. Derrida argues that this usure of metaphorical language is a natural consequence of the repeated use of words. As a metaphor becomes commonplace, its original figurative power diminishes, and it is absorbed into the proper meaning of the word. The original literal meaning, the inscription on the observed side of the coin, become obscured, leaving behind a metaphorical meaning that has become normalized and accepted. For example, consider the word head, as it releases the human body. Originally, head referred to the physical part of the body containing the brain. However, through metaphorical usage, head has also come to represent the seat of intelligence, leadership, or even a specific item or topic. So, the head of the table, the head of the department also. So, the original literal meaning of head is still present, but it has been overshadowed by the metaphorical meanings that have become integrated into the word's usage. The process of usure demonstrates how metaphorical language over time can shift the meaning of words, creating a constant interplay between literal and figurative meanings. In conclusion, Jacques Derrida's central argument on metaphor posits that metaphors inherently carry their own demise within them. As metaphors are used and reused, their original literal meanings gradually fade away, overshadowed by the metaphorical meanings that become dominant. This process results in the eventual obscuring and replacement of the original meaning by the metaphorical meaning. Derrida's insight suggests that the evolution of language and thought involves a continual transformation of meaning, where metaphors play a crucial role in shaping and reshaping our understanding of the world. We have also here a metaphor as a contextual change of meaning. Speech holds a crucial role in shaping our understanding of the world. Ricoeur agreed with his fundamental premise, emphasizing that metaphors are more than just substitutions for literal words that could be exhaustively paraphrased. However, Ricoeur went a step farther, proposing a more nuanced approach to metaphor. He believed that both dead metaphors, those that have become so commonplace their figurative nature is barely perceptible, and novel metaphors, those that introduce a fresh and unexpected comparison, should be understood within the same theoretical framework. This contrasts with previous theories can often treated these two types of metaphors separately, often relying on the vague notion of associated commonplaces to explain dead metaphors. Ricoeur's unique contribution lies in his rejection of this simplistic approach. He argued that both dead and novel metaphors are essential for understanding the dynamic nature of language and thought. By treating them within the same framework, Ricoeur opened the door for a more comprehensive, insightful analysis of metaphors' role in shaping meaning and perception. Ricoeur's key ideas on metaphor emphasize its dynamic and transformative nature. He highlights that understanding metaphor entails recognizing the interplay between literal and metaphorical meanings within specific contexts. By focusing on context and the dynamic relationship between sense and reference, Ricoeur reveals the power of metaphor to shape understanding and offer new perspectives on language and the world. Turning from the linguistic to the cognitive view of metaphor. Earlier theories of metaphor focus on linguistic aspects, overlooking cognitive and cultural dimensions in understanding metaphors. The shift to cognitive linguistics exemplified the conceptual metaphor theory, emphasizes metaphors as cognitive tools shaping thoughts. This perspective acknowledged culture's role in developing and interpreting metaphors, influencing expressions like time is money. The interplay of cognition and culture molds dynamic metaphors, urging analysis beyond language to appreciate their cognitive and cultural significance in shaping beliefs and communication. Brigitte Nerlich and David D. Clark, in their 2000 work Mind, Meaning, and Metaphor, The Philosophy and Psychology of Metaphor in 19th Century Germany, shed light on a crucial shift in the understanding of metaphor that emerged during the 18th and 19th centuries. They highlight the contributions of thinkers like B. H. Smart and Jean Paul, who challenged the prevailing view of metaphor as a mere rhetorical device. These thinkers argued that metaphor is deeply intertwined with the human mind and body. Playing a fundamental metaphor is deeply has a role in shaping our thoughts and experiences. They emphasize the metaphor is not role in shaping interpreting metaphors, influencing expressions like time is money. The interplay of cognition and culture molds dynamic metaphors, urging analysis beyond language to appreciate their cognitive and cultural significance in shaping beliefs and communication. Brigitte Nerlich and David D. Clark, in their 2000 work Mind, Meaning, and Metaphor, The Philosophy and Psychology of Metaphor in 19th Century Germany, shed light on a crucial shift in the understanding of metaphor that emerged during the 18th and 19th centuries. They highlight the contributions of thinkers like B. H. Smart and Jean Paul, who challenged the prevailing view of metaphor as a mere rhetorical device. These thinkers argued that metaphor is deeply intertwined with the human mind and body. Playing a fundamental metaphor is deeply has a role in shaping our thoughts and experiences. They emphasize the metaphor is not role in shaping our thoughts or simply a linguistic embellishment but rather a cognitive process rooted in our embodied experience. This perspective, later formalized in cognitive linguistics, sees a metaphor a fundamental tool for understanding and navigating the world, rather than a mere decorative element of language. Smart and Jean Paul, along with others their era, paved the way for a deeper understanding of metaphor, one that recognizes its cognitive and experiential basis. The key shift in perspective regarding metaphor is from considering it solely as linguistic device to recognizing rather it as a cognitive process deeply rooted in human experience and influenced by culture. This shift acknowledges that metaphors are not just decorative language tools but fundamental cognitive mechanisms that shape our thoughts, perceptions, and understanding of the world. By understanding metaphor as cognitive process, we realize its pervasive influence on how we conceptualize and navigate the world around us. Metaphors are not just linguistic ornaments. They are powerful tools that structure our thoughts, shape our beliefs, and influence our behaviors. This shift in perspective highlights the profound impact of metaphor on our cognition and communication, emphasizing its role as fundamental aspect of human experience and cultural expressions. And last, we have current multidisciplinary metaphor research. Reuven Chur, a prominent scholar in the field of literary studies, coined the term cognitive poetics in the 1970s, marking a significant shift in the way we understand literature. Chur's approach, as outlined in his 1992 work, The Cognitive Turn in Literary Studies, emphasizes the role of cognitive psychology and neuroscience in analyzing literary aesthetics. He sought to understand how readers engage with text not just on a linguistic level, but also through the cognitive processes that shape their understanding and experiences. This approach aligned with the broader cognitive turn that swept through the humanities in the late 20th century. This shift moved away from a purely linguistic focus where texts were analyzed in isolation, towards a more holistic understanding of the interaction between text and readers. The cognitive turn recognizes that the meaning of a text is not inherent in the words themselves, but rather recognizes the meaning of a text is not inherent in the words themselves, but rather emerges through the complex interplay of cognitive processes, cultural context, and individual experiences. Chure's work, therefore, can be seen as part of these larger individual experiences, and also in intellectual movement and emphasizing the importance of understanding the cognitive mechanisms that underlie literary interpretation. He also argues that by incorporating insights mechanisms that underlie literary interpretation from a cognitive psychology and neuroscience, we can gain a richer and more insights from cognitive and psychology and neuroscience, we can gain a richer and more nuanced understanding of how readers engage with literary texts and create a meaning from them. Cognitive poetics, a multidisciplinary field, integrates linguistics, psychology, literature, critical theory, and more to explore how readers engage with literary texts. Grounded in the cognitive science, it studies how textual cues trigger cognitive processes drawing from cognitive linguistics. It now delves into readily effects and aesthetics, examining how cognitive psychology and neuroscience shape emotional, aesthetic, and ethical responses to literature.
Good evening, everyone. I am Charity Ivone Espino. So, my topic is all about conceptual theory metaphor. So, traditional views see metaphor as peripheral in language and thought. Lakoff and Johnson, 1980, argue metaphor as fundamental parts of concepts, not just words. Yes, metaphors are not just figures of speech, they are fundamental to how we think and understand complex ideas. Metaphors can help us understand abstract concepts by comparing them to more familiar words, things we can gain also new insights. Metaphors are often unconscious. We use them without even realizing it. Next is metaphors are often unconscious and essential for reasoning and imagination. Yes, metaphors also can be used to structure our reasoning and imagination. They can help us to think creatively and solve problems. Next, conceptual metaphors help in relating one concept to another. Yes, conceptual metaphors are a type of metaphor that help us to understand one concept and terms for another. For example, the concept of love can be understood in terms of journey. Yes. So next is concept A is concept B, where is A target domain and B is the source domain. So the structure of conceptual metaphor is concept A is concept B, where A is the target domain, the concept we are trying to understand, and B is the source domain, the familiar concept we are using to understand the A. So, example, love is a journey with expression like they are the crossroads and the relation, illustrating this mapping. So yes, can be illustrated by expression like they are at a crossroad in the relationship. This expression maps the concept of relation to the concept of journey. So next is types of conceptual metaphors. First, structural metaphors help understand one domain through the structure of another. So these metaphors help us understand one concept by structuring it like another. Like for example, argument is war. Help us understand argument in terms of battle. So next is orientational metaphors. It provides a current evaluative framework like concepts associated with upward or downward orientation. So these metaphors use spatial orientations to convey abstract ideas. Like for example, like happy is up and also sad is down. Like help us understand emotions in terms of physical location. So next is ontological metaphors, like offer a substance like status to abstract concepts, personification of death. So these metaphors treat abstract concept as if they were physical objects. Like for example, love is a journey. Help us understand love in terms of physical journey. So next is mappings between source and target domains are partial, requiring multiple sources for full understanding. So partial mappings, when we use a metaphor, we only map certain aspects of the source domain to the target domain. So this means that we often need multiple metaphors to fully understand a complex concept. So next is metaphorical entailments occur when aspects of the source income the target but must adhere to the invariance hypothesis, which emphasizes coherence across domains. So metaphors can lead to new insights and understanding. However, this new understanding must be consistent with the overall structure of the metaphor. So next is metaphor are shared cognitive system within cultures and are used unconsciously in language. These metaphors are part of our shared cognitive system. We use them unconsciously in our everyday language and thought. So lastly is often considered dead. Many metaphors remain active and vital everyday communication rooted in shared human experience. So, dead metaphors, like many metaphors that we use today, were once considered live metaphors. However, over time, they have become so familiar that we no longer think of them as metaphors. So next is the Pragal Jazz Group develop a metaphor identification procedure MIP within the cognitive linguistic framework. So the Pragal Jazz Group developed a method to identify metaphors in language. This method is called the metaphor identification procedure. So this procedure used a defined list of criteria to assess whether specific words comply as linguistic metaphors. So the MIP uses a set of rules to decide if a word is being used metaphorically. These rules are based on the idea that metaphors involve using words in a way that is different from their usual literal meaning. Next is the MIP aims to identify metaphors reliably, minimizing subjective intuition. So, the goal of MIP is to identify metaphors in a consistent and reliable way. This means that different people using the MIP should come to the same conclusion about whether a word is a metaphor. So next is it consists of several definitive systems as outlined in their 2007 publication. Also, these steps research follows. So the MIP involves a series of steps that researchers follow to identify metaphors in a text or speech. These steps are outlined in detail in publication by the Pragal Group from 2007. So next is procedure of metaphors. So first, read the entire text discourse to establish a general understanding of the meaning. So it gives you a holistic view of the author's intended meaning and context, and also identify the main topic and theme. Like understanding the core message helps you interpret the language choices. Second is determine the lexical unit in the text discourse. So it means like text into individual words and phrases, like these are the building blocks of language, and also focus on words that it might have multiple meanings or connotations. These are potential candidates for metaphorical usage. So third is for each lexical unit in the text, establish its meaning in the context, that is how it applies to an entity, relation, or attribute in the situation evoked by the text. So take into account what comes before and after the lexical unit. So there are this is the more in analyzing lexical unit. So determine contextual meaning, like how does the word or phrase function within the specific context of the text, and also identify basic meaning, like what is the word most common or literal meaning in everyday language. And also, it concludes compare contextual and basic meanings, like do they contrast or diverge. So, if the lexical unit has more basic current contemporary meaning in the other context, then the given context decide whether the contextual meaning contrasts with the basic meaning but can be understood in comparison with it. So, fourth, if yes, mark the lexical unit as metaphorical. So, if the contextual meaning differs significantly from the basic meaning and is used to create a comparison or association, it's like a metaphor. So, I will give you an example. So, the storm of emotions overwhelmed her. So, their contextual meaning is the word storm. It's used to describe a strong emotional state. So, their basic meaning is a storm is a meteorological phenomenon involving wind, rain, or snow. So, um, their comparison is the emotional intensity is compared to the physical force and the chaos of a storm. So, the metaphor is the use of storm is a metaphorical because it extends the meaning beyond its literal sense to create a vivid image of the emotional turmoil. So, by following that step, so we can effectively identify and analyze metaphorical language in a text discourse. So next is recommendation for practice. So utilize conceptual metaphor theory as a guideline for analyzing literary works. Refer to Kovex's 2002-2010 and Simpson 2004 for practical activities focused on metaphor analysis. So, CMT explains how we understand abstract concepts through concrete experiences. Metaphors also are cognitive tools that shape our thinking and language. Um, Next is begin with the Emily Dickinson poems for metaphor analysis using methods from relevant studies. So, start with Emily Dickinson poems. They are rich and metaphorical language and have been extensively analyzed using CMT. So, alternatively, choose a poem or book you enjoy. So, compare findings with those from Margaret Freeman's 1995 article for Dickinson's work. So, identify the underlying conceptual metaphor and also look words or phrases used metaphorically, like for example, hope is the thing with the feathers. Hope is metaphorically compared to a bird. And also, hope is bird suggests that hope is a fragile, resilient, and ever present. In Margaret Freeman's 1995 article on Dickinson's work, like compare your analysis with her findings and also identify similarities and differences. So lastly is practice by choosing a favorite poem or book to identify linguistic and conceptual metaphors systematically. So, systematically identify linguistic and conceptual metaphors and also analyze their underlying meanings and implication. So, next is future direction and the cognitive tradition. So, Lakoff and Johnson, 1999, expand metaphor theory, highlighting various approaches including Johnson's conflation theory and Grady's primary metaphor theory. Conflation involves the simultaneous activation of source and target domains from shared experience. So, this theory suggests that we often blend two related concepts together. Like, for example, the concepts of seeing and knowing are often conflated, leading to expression like, I see what you mean. So, next is primary metaphors like purposes or destination form the basis for complex metaphors such as love is a journey. So, this theory proposes that simple basic metaphors form the foundation for more complex ones. For instance, the primary metaphor purposes our destinations underlies the more complex metaphor love is a journey. So, next is the neutral theory of metaphor asserts the conceptual mappings correspond to neural connections, reflecting common sensory motor experience across languages. So, this theory suggests that our brains are neural connections to map abstract concept onto physical experiences. This means that our understanding of abstract ideas is rooted in our physical experiences. So, next is blending theory focuses on the integration of mental spaces through conceptual blending. So, blending theory, this theory focuses on how we combined different mental spaces to create new meanings. Like this process involves blending elements from different sources to form a new integrated concept. So, next is research in embodiment examines that connection between mind and body in cognitive process. Gibbs 2006b. An example by Gibbs 2004 illustrate how Neruda's poetry uses embodied experiences like hunger to convey deeper meanings, showing that bodily sensation influence cognition and metaphor. So, these concepts suggest that, or also this theory emphasizes the role of the body in shaping our cognitive processes. Our physical experience, such as sensations and emotions, influence how we think and understand the world. And also, embodied metaphor is this concept suggests that metaphors are grounded in our physical experiences. For example, the poet Neruda uses bodily sensations like hunger to convey deeper meanings in that theory. So the human body is foundational to cognition, shaping our understanding through universal human experiences. So these theories highlight the interconnectedness between our physical experiences, cognitive process, and language use. They emphasize that metaphors are not just literary devices but fundamental tools for understanding the world. So, the last part is conclusion. The study of metaphors spans literature, ethic, and cognition. So, the study of metaphor is a broad field. It's not just about literature and ethic, but also how we think and understand the world. So, next is the primary metaphor in Shakespeare's sonnet as a lifetime is a day, linking a day's progression to life stages. So, a lifetime is a day. This means that stages of a day, morning, noon, night, are like the stages of person life: childhood, adulthood, old, and also age. Like old age. So next is morning symbolizes childhood, night represents death. So this is because morning is a time of new beginnings and hope, just like childhood. And also the night symbolizes death. This is because night is a time of darkness and stillness, just like a death. So another metaphor, life is light, connects life with life and darkness with death. So another metaphor used in sonnet is life is light. This is means that life is like light and death is like darkness. So next is the metaphor life is fire depicts life as gradual transition from warmth to coldness and darkness. So Shakespeare's use of these metaphors reflects common ways we think about our lives. So Shakespeare uses these metaphors to help us understand the passage of time and inevitability of death. And also, these are common ways that people think about life. So lastly is multiple conventional metaphors enhance the sonnet's exploration of life. So by using multiple metaphors, Shakespeare is able to explore the theme of life and that is a rich and complex way. So that's all. Thank you for listening, everyone.